He's a good observer of the Pareto principle. A small minority of people do all the productive work. It's like, all you people, you're gone.
Elon Musk is in control of Twitter this morning, cleaning house. The world's richest man closed his blockbuster deal overnight to take the reins of the social media giant.
I know people who know Elon Musk very well, who've worked for him, and these are very able people, to say the least. And they really admire him. He has the ability to do exactly what he did. He went into Twitter and he said, he's a good observer of the Pareto principle. A small minority of people do all the productive work. It's like, all you people, you're gone. And he just does it. It's like, and everybody who's whiny and complaining whines and complains about that. And no doubt some people who were doing a credible job were also let go, because it's a pretty broad swath, let's say.
It's literally top priority in the whole company, is that Twitter cannot be used for child exploitation. I think that just obviously should be the number one priority. Yeah, it's insane that for it not to be the number one priority.
But he's got rid of 75% of the people, and Twitter is still working.
With record traffic.
Right, exactly. And so I think he will, and apparently he's also put the boots to the people who are trafficking in child sexual exploitation already.
Incredible.
2 weeks. Right, no kidding. No kidding. Incredible in two ways. Incredible that he did it, but even more incredible that he could do it that fast and that it hadn't been done. Right. So, and Musk also, it seems to me that the evidence is quite clear that he not only has a pretty good eye, but he is capable of learning. So he'll experiment and he'll learn from his experiments, and we'll see if he can clean up Twitter. That's tough. I'm afraid, deeply afraid, that virtualization enables psychopathy.
Musk has turned the topic of online safety into part of a larger effort to disparage Twitter's previous leaders and portrays ownership of the company as part of his socio-political battle against the woke mind virus, as he calls center-left to far-left ideals. That shift comes as he has further embraced the kind of far-right online rhetoric that often also includes false claims of child sex abuse.
And that might be a fatal problem socially as we move towards a more virtualized world. It's not easy to keep the Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic sadists under control. They're a small proportion of the population. But it's all about them and their short-term needs, and they'll do anything to make those paramount. It looks to me that when we virtualize the world, we take all the constraints off those people. And that's not good. So, for example, on social media, all the power's in the hands of the accusers. Well, that's not good. Believe all women. It's like, yeah, fair enough. Except it's believe most women. As soon as it's all, it's like, yeah, well, what about the psychopaths? Well, they don't exist. It's like, oh, you wouldn't say that if you ever met one. So if you think that all people who are malevolent are only victims, you're naive and fortunate, and you better wake up. The problem with virtualization is that we don't understand our environments well enough to be certain that we're not excluding something vital when we concentrate only on what we think conceptually is important. Now, I meet with my son pretty regularly for a project we're working on, which is an app that will teach people to write while they write and use it. So we're quite excited about this. But I meet with him virtually once a week. And it's actually very efficient. He's on the screen. We can see our project in front of us. We can do mutual editing of some of the underlying material, educational material. There's a real place for it. And I have a cottage up north in Toronto where we've set up a studio like your studio here, although ours isn't quite as impressive. But I can have an interview and discussion with anyone, anywhere in the world, even in a foreign language. And that's like unbelievably remarkable. Because one of these days, someone like that's going to come and knock on your door, and you are going to be one sorry person. So, and it's very difficult to keep that 5% of the population regulated. All their regulation is external. because they have no internal regulation. And I don't see that we have any ability to regulate that online, and we reward it. Right? We reward it with attention, we monetize it. This could be... See, I actually think that's what's driving polarization. I don't think polarization is real in some sense. I think it's all driven by undue attention paid to dark, tetrad, Machiavellian, narcissistic, psychopathic sadists. And that's polluting because they communicate in an untrammeled manner in the virtual world. When I look back on that time in my life, I certainly can't reduce the educational experience to virtual classes and virtual tests. Maybe that's 10% of it. And we don't know how to replicate those environments that are so formative, especially in their everydayness, because you live with your roommates. That's a 24-hour thing. And so the problem with virtualization is that we don't understand our environments well enough to be certain that we're not excluding something vital when we concentrate only on what we think conceptually is important. These new technologies, they're unbelievably radical and they're very hard to master. And so we all have to be careful and try to keep our feet on the ground to some degree when we're using them. That's a lurking temptation for people who have a talent in that direction, right? Because every temperament is going to come with its own temptations. And to be a person like you, say, although I'm not saying this about you necessarily, although it's probably true about you too, is that you're very likely to be extroverted and disagreeable. If you weren't extroverted, you wouldn't have that verbal fluency and you wouldn't be comfortable in the public eye. And if you weren't disagreeable, you wouldn't challenge people. Okay, so what's the problem with being extroverted and disagreeable? Well, it tilts you towards narcissism. Now, there are ways that can be regulated. Maybe you're enmeshed in good social arrangements, right? So you have a husband, say, who helps keep you sane, and children and friends, and they help box you in. And maybe you're conscientious, and so there are, and like I said, every temperamental variant has its attendant temptations. But it's definitely the case that beware of unintended consequences. It's like, oh no, this thing will just do what I want it to do and nothing else. It's like, no. It's definitely the case that social media enables female antisocial type behavior, clearly. And so it scales. We were talking about whether the feminine ethos scales. Feminine pathology scales magnificently on social media. And so God only knows what the consequence of that's going to be. And that's part of cancel culture. It's like, well, we can't confront you directly, but we can sure take you out behind the scenes. And that's everyone familiar with junior high culture among teenage girls knows what that's like.